The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. My name is Adrian Benjamins, and I'm joined by Coach. Coach, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing this evening, Adrian?
I'm doing really good, man. We had a really good Nuggets-Spurs game that just wrapped up. I'm excited about. Buckle up, man. We are going to a Game 7, the closest first-round series that we've had. What do you think about this series, man? I know you had said last week on our show that you thought the Spurs could shock the Nuggets and give them an upset. You still feeling that? Or do you think that home court advantage, for the Nuggets, do you think that could play a big factor in this Game 7? What do you think about it?
Well, I certainly think that the home court for Denver is a big advantage, and I know they're expecting to win it. But my key point, I've been talking about the last couple of days is, and tonight as well, is I mentioned last night I was on with your buddy Neil there. We had a really good time. But I mentioned there too, it's to not have ever been in an NBA playoff closeout game is a big deal. And, Murray, Jokic, those guys, even though Jokic had like a phenomenal game tonight, those guys have never been in a situation where, okay, we're going to close out an NBA playoff series. And that makes a tremendous difference. And, the coach as well. You got Pop and these guys that have been through this rodeo so many times. It is hard to knock those guys out. So I still give the Spurs a shot against Denver. I know they'll be a big underdog, but I just, it's one of those things where experience makes just a tremendous difference.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And, it would not shock me if the Spurs get a victory here in this one, because just as you said, man, the Nuggets really lacking experience. But if I had to put money on the game, I would lean the Nuggets just due to the home court advantage. I think home court advantage will likely give them the edge. What do you think about that whole thing about the Nuggets playing in that mile high? Like, do you think elevation is do you think that's an advantage, or do you think that's kind of an overplayed factor?
No, I do believe that it is a factor. There's something to it with just getting used to that elevation. Your breathing's just slightly different, and especially as guys come in to that atmosphere and aren't used to it as much. I think it has an effect. I do think it's something to consider. I don't think it's a massive thing that they make it to be, but I think there is something to be said about that. Have you ever been to Denver?
I've never been to Denver, no, but I have been. I'm in Southern California. I've gone up to Big Bear a few times. I'm an avid snowboarder, so I've dealt with some elevation, and I definitely feel like I get more tired when I'm in elevation. So I definitely think that could be a factor. You know what, though? I think maybe at this point it could be a little overplayed because the Spurs have already been to the Nuggets arena a few times. I feel like if it was like their first visit in a long time, maybe then it could be something that they're having trouble dealing with. But I think by now they're probably used to it. So for me, it's probably more that home crowd factor. Just the crowd rooting for you. Really good fan base in Denver, so I know they're going to be loud. And, man, it's going to be a good Game 7. But, Coach, one other series I want to talk to you about. Last night, the Clippers surprising the Warriors, man, getting another victory in Oracle. Coach, you and I talked about on the last show just kind of how fun it is to watch this Clippers team, right? Because no superstars, no egos. They kind of just play as a team. They're kind of like this blue-collar, just hard-working, all-effort team. A lot of fun to watch. And to see them beat a team like the Warriors that is just full of talent. I mean, 4 All-Stars. What do you think? Do you think they're going back to LA. You think the Clippers got a chance to extend this thing, or do you think the Warriors just wrap this thing up here in the next game?
I think they really looked past this game. I think they were already zoning in on Houston, and I think they just looked past it, to be honest with you. I just don't see how there's any way they can win two more games. But I'll tell you, to give them props, I've enjoyed it so much. And as an old coach for the young players, I was been touting the Clippers to my son this whole series because it's just so great for the young guys to see somebody like a Patrick Beverley. Doesn't matter if you're a foot shorter, literally, or, he had 14 or 15 rebounds yesterday. And, he's like 6'2", maybe. And, it just shows effort and defense and coaching and all the really important things I think a lot of young players out there need to take note of, because it's just not about running up and down and shooting 75 threes and outscoring your opponent. You can win some games like that, but it's great to see really a throwback team and a throwback game to go out there and go after it like that. So it's been a blast, but man, I think the fun is going to run out here on this next game.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, we saw the Warriors really take it to the Clippers. I think it was that first game in LA, so it must have been game 3. They blew them out. The home court wasn't really a factor. I think, if you would have told me at the beginning of the series that the Clippers would get 2 wins, I would have said no way. So, I mean, I love watching this Clippers team this year. The whole season, they've been outstanding. I got to tip my hat off to this team, to Coach Doc Rivers. What an amazing job he did. Just a great season for the Clippers. So even if it does end on Friday night, what a great season they've had. Coach, I want to run out now to the Eastern Conference side. Man, I am salivating over this matchup between the Bucks and the Celtics. I might be most excited out of all of the second round matchups about this series. This is really interesting, man. The Bucks played really well. The Celtics swept their first round series. Bucks have home court advantage. They're the number 1 seed. What do you think of this series? What are your predictions?
Well, I'm probably in the very small minority here. I just don't feel that the Celtics even have a puncher's chance. I see this as a sweep or 4-1 Milwaukee. Wow. I know that that's going to upset some of our hoopballer Celtics fans out there, but I just don't see how they can match up. I mean, first of all, Giannis alone, I know it's hard for everybody to match up against Giannis, but I'm not sure what they're going to do. Marcus Morris or Al Horford, maybe they can't check him, but that's really their only 2 options that I'm aware of. And I just think Milwaukee's too loaded. Brogdon being out the first 2 games doesn't help, but those are the 2 in Milwaukee. There's a good chance he'll be back for game 3 in Boston, and I think Milwaukee's too loaded. So I know a lot of people feel similar to you, Adrian, that they're really stoked for this particular series, but I just think it's going to be lopsided unless, Milwaukee all of a sudden realizes, that they don't have a ton of experience either. And they, if they're, no pun intended, a deer in the headlights, if they can get past, that idea, which I don't think they'll start feeling that till the conference finals, but I think they're going to roll the Celtics, to be honest with you.
So I slightly agree with you. I am leaning towards the Bucks. I just feel like, man, they have looked so good all year. At the very start of the season, I would have picked the Celtics, but man, we've seen them have their ups and downs this year. We've seen them their players not be on the same page, some discord there between the players. So, look, they had a really easy series against Indiana, but I don't think it's going to be like that with the Bucks. But so I'm saying the Bucks are going to win, but I think it's going to be a little closer, like maybe a 6 or 7 game series. So I do agree with you that we're going to see the Bucks win, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer. But I do hear what you're saying, man. The Bucks have looked fantastic. One of the deepest teams in the NBA, top to bottom. I mean, Brook Lopez and Middleton and Bledsoe. You got a nice bench with Mirotic. I mean, they look really good. And with home court advantage, they don't look scared either. You know, I don't really think they're thinking about the lack of experience. The success that they've had this year, finishing as the number 1 seed, I think they're kind of blinded by that, but in a good way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you. And I think, you know, just being through the rigors of stuff like this, you know, there always comes a time at some point where a young team, inexperienced like that, will all of a sudden think, oh my God, we have a chance to win it. And then they'll freeze up a little bit. Now, again, I don't think that'll be until the conference finals or maybe even the NBA finals. But, you know, I'll tell you that the Bucks are the real deal. And I'll tell you when I jumped on board and really believed they had a shot to win it all was when Bledsoe signed his extension. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, he left about $25-30 million on the table if he would have left and extended. And his reasoning was that he loved that team. He loved the city. He was committed to him. And if you hear Giannis speak, I don't think he'll ever leave that team either. And they have a bond there. And I think that everything that they're sort of about team-wise is what's lacking with the Celtics. I don't think Kyrie really wants to be there, to be honest with you. He seems a little put off. And, you know, as much as I respect the coach, he seems to have lost a little bit of that edge that he had prior because there's been some dissension amongst the troops. So, you know, I just think it's one of those scenarios. You know, Boston was fortunate to play a broken Indiana team without their leader. And, you know, I think that really helped them. And I think it's, getting the hype up with people thinking the Celtics have a shot. But I'm not buying.
I agree with you, man. I think that's a great take. One other series that I want to talk about will stay in the East. This one, too. Coach, we got so many. This year, the playoffs have just been amazing, and it's not ending. The second round is looking good. All from east to west, the second round looks outstanding. I want to move over to Toronto and Philly, man. This looks like another interesting matchup. Could go either way. A lot of stars on both sides, a lot of firepower. What are your thoughts on this series? What is your prediction, man?
Well, I personally, I think this is going to be a phenomenal series. I think these two teams are just loaded for bear. Good matchup. You know, this probably is going to be a 7-gamer, 6 or 7 games for sure, in my opinion. I'm sticking with my initial pick. You know, like I mentioned last week with Philly. I think with these 3 or 4 days rest and a healed up Embiid somewhat. With Butler and Harris and Simmons. I mean, they're loaded. I think they can take Toronto. I think Toronto has some weaknesses. However, Toronto's a fantastic defensive team. They picked up Gasol basically for this purpose, to try to go against Embiid in the playoffs. And, you know, they've got Ibaka and Van Fleet and some very good players off the bench. So, you know, I'm really stoked for this series. I think it's going to be fantastic. Every game should be competitive, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm with you on that one. And I agree with you that this playoffs is just getting rolling now, and it's going to be pretty dynamic. This is fun. It's good time to be an NBA fan for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in years past, it's like the playoffs have been so top heavy that I usually don't get super excited until we get to like the Eastern and Western Conference finals. We get to the end, but this year, man, it has been so wide open, so many good teams. And this Toronto and Philly, man, just as you said, the matchups are insane. I mean, the backcourts, with Lowry versus Simmons, Jimmy Butler versus Kawhi Leonard, the front court, as you mentioned, Marc Gasol, going against Joel Embiid. I mean, this is just going to be outstanding. I cannot wait, man. A lot of fun stuff.
I'll tell you the main thing to watch with this series is they're going to put Kawhi on Simmons. And Simmons is intimidated by Kawhi. If you watch some of his games against him, he turns the ball over. He is really intimidated. So if he gets all up in Simmons' business there, it could be trouble for Philly. He's going to have to really step up. Kawhi's just such an amazing player defensively too. And, so that's a key to watch as well. But I'm with you, man. Who do you like? Who you picking?
Oh, man. I'm going to go with Toronto, but I think this one's going to go down to the wire. And, I think, too, this series is really going to depend on the health of Joel Embiid. I'm slightly concerned in that last series how he was iffy going into a bunch of games. I like that we have a little layoff here, that the games aren't going to start till I think they play maybe Saturday, so I think he's got an extra day or so. So I think he's going to be ready to go. But, Coach, if he suffers any setbacks in Game 1 and he's got to sit games, that could really affect the outcome of this series. So I'm going to give the slight edge to Toronto. But, man, this one's going to go down to the wire, man. This could be like a 7-game series easily.
I agree, and there's no question. If Embiid goes down, they're done. But he is getting a 4-day rest period between the last series and this one. So that could end up being a key factor. I mean, these two may beat each other up so much, it could put them at odds if they face a Milwaukee, to get to the finals. But, we'll see. They got to lace them up. There's a lot of guys that haven't been there before, and, they got to prove themselves. So we'll see how that goes.
Definitely. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up on playoff talk. You got anything else you think we need to add or go over regarding the NBA playoffs?
Well, I'll put you on the spot. Let's say Golden State does win this series, which would be the greatest upset in the history of the NBA if they didn't. Who do you like in Golden State, Houston? That's phenomenal right there, man.
Yeah, and that's a really good question because last year I feel like if Chris Paul did not get hurt at the end of that series, I think Houston would have won that series, man. They were looking like they could win that series. So that's real interesting. I think I'm still going to go Warriors. They're going to have home court advantage. But, man, another good series, man. A really interesting thing. I read today that the Rockets have already headed to California. They plan to already practice at Oracle Arena. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a little disrespectful to the Clippers, considering that series isn't even over yet? Or do you think it's a really smart move on their part to get used to the time zone and to already get used to the arena? What do you think about that, Coach?
I think it's a genius move. It's 99% inevitable that that's going to be the matchup, and the time zone, the gym, getting settled in. I think it's a brilliant move by Morey and D'Antoni to do that. I think it gives them a little bit of an edge that they may need because it's a razor. When Cousins went down, to me it became almost a coin flip because Houston's playing some good ball. And their benches, some guys off the bench are contributing. So, yeah, every little tiny edge you can get at this point, makes a difference. So I think they're doing a smart thing. Now, that would be the greatest ever if the Clippers were able to pull that off. But, I wouldn't hold my breath.
One other interesting thing to note is Portland has already finished up their series against the Thunder. They're waiting for the winner here from the Nuggets and the Spurs, who we already talked about, are going to Game 7. What do you think of that potential series about Portland facing one of these teams? You think that would be a good matchup for Portland?
It's a complete toss-up. Those three teams, based on just talent, experience, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I think any of those teams could win a series against the other. It's just who's going to be hot, who's going to get some breaks. There's just no human way that Dame can keep playing at this level for every game. I mean, he's out of his mind. So, it's, again, we're looking at maybe a 7-game series in that one too. So
yeah,
very, very competitive. I'm not even sure who to give the favoritism to. I guess Denver, because of their record and their seeding, but I still think, like I say, we'll see. I'm not counting out the Spurs, and if that happens, they may be just slightly gassed for going against Portland, but we'll see.
Nice. Well, all right, Coach. I think we covered the NBA playoffs. I can't even think of anything else that I think needs going over. On last week's show, we talked about some fantasy awards. We took a look at who we thought was MVP. I think we both agreed we liked James Harden as MVP. Do you still agree with that?
I do. I took a lot of heat from my son, though, onto the Giannis bandwagon, and I'm not thinking straight that Giannis is the man, but that's probably who's going to win it. But I still say, from the NBA and from a fantasy league, I will take Harden on any given night.
Yeah, I think, from a fantasy standpoint, I think it would be hard to give it to Giannis. Did finish as the number 8 player in 9 category leagues, where James Harden did finish as the number 1 player. So I think statistically, just due to that fact, I think you'd have to give it to Harden. But reality-wise, I'm on the other side of the fence, Coach. I think Giannis, I think he deserves it, man. I know we talked about it last week, but the Bucks finishing with the best record in the NBA. Yeah, they do play in a slightly easier Eastern Conference, but still had a lot of victories against Western Conference teams. So that factor that they had the number 1 record, and I love that Giannis is that two-way player. A lot of people think he's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. So, I just love that he plays both sides of the ball. And we talked about, you had mentioned how Giannis and some of the other Bucks players want to stay. Like, it looks like they've really developed this thing. And that's another thing that I love about Giannis. At the All-Star break, he had said to the media that he really doesn't have a desire to come to LA or come to New York or these big markets. Like, he's not attracted to that. He loves the smaller market. I think he likes not dealing with all the drama and all the unnecessary attention, and I love that about that guy, man. So what an outstanding season he's had, and man, the future of the NBA, so bright, man, so bright.
Yeah, and he's such a fantastic young man, from everything that we see. I mean, it's so good for the young players to be rooting and just wearing his jersey, because he represents it so well. So I'm with you, man. I'm a fan.
All right, and you know what? Speaking of young guys, future in the NBA, let's get into some more fantasy awards, Coach. Let's jump over to Rookie of the Year. And this one, I'm really interested to get your take on this one, Coach, because I know you're a big Luka Doncic fan. I am a mega Luka Doncic fan. I love the guy. But what's interesting, statistically, he finished behind DeAndre Ayton and Trae Young this year. Statistically, fantasy-wise, finished behind those two guys. So, Coach, if you were given your Rookie of the Year, would you give it to Luka, or would you give it to Trae Young or DeAndre Ayton? Who do you like as your fantasy Rookie of the Year?
Well, first of all, I'd rank Ayton about 16th. So that's what I think about Ayton. I think Trae Young had a phenomenal final third of the season that just really at least made it a conversation, which, he's got a bright future for sure. He he just has to learn to defend. I mean, that's the only thing that's killing him is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was the worst statistically the worst defensive point guard in the league for starting point guard. So that's an issue. As far as Luka goes, yes, I am certainly a fan, but looking at it, even if you just step back from it, Luka's season was outstanding. I mean, when you watch those Mavs games, it was just all about Luka. I mean, he led the team, he handled the ball, distributed the ball, scored the ball. He did all this at 19 years old. That's what's unbelievable. And I think just the way he just stood up and took over the team, with Dirk being there and sort of handing him the baton, I think it's just absolute slam dunk that he's Rookie of the Year. And I think from a fantasy perspective, he's just scratching the surface. I think that he is, I had mentioned to you, I traded for him in my keeper league before the season ended. And I'm just excited about that because I think his future is very bright. And I would name him both my fantasy and real Rookie of the Year.
Well, Coach, I'm on board with you again, man. I agree 100%. I think Luka, Coach, I was able to draft him in a hoop ball 24-team dynasty league.
What?
He was my number one pick in that league. And even though statistically I had mentioned that Ayton and Young finished higher than him on the play radar, if you were redrafting, reality or fantasy-wise, if you're redrafting a new league, I think you're going to pick Luka Doncic ahead of those guys year after year. I mean, this guy has the potential to be like a generational type of talent, right? Like a guy that changes the game. I mean, I knew he was going to be great, but I didn't think that he would score as easily as he did, or just that the game would be as easy as it was. He was doing things on the court, Coach, that I thought it would take him more time. Just how comfortable he felt, making some really amazing passes, and he got to where he wanted to on the court. His range was hitting some outrageous threes. Like, I didn't think we'd see stuff like that from him this early on. As you mentioned, kind of taking over that Dallas team really early, which, by the way, their coach, his name is escaping me right now. Dallas Mavericks coach, he's not a big rookie guy. He's not a guy that usually, kind of an old school type of coach where the rookies got to earn it. He handed that team over to Luka very early. Dirk as well, stepped aside. So I think it says a lot about him. And I'm 100% I agree with you, Coach. Rookie of the Year, fantasy, and reality-wise. Okay, let's go over to another award. What do you think of Waiver Wire Player of the Year? Who do you got for that?
Waiver Wire Player of the Year. Oh, man, that is... Now we're talking... Yeah, you go first. Let me put you on.
From a lot of the sites I've seen, a lot of people like Pascal Siakam, who outstanding. What a great year he's had. I give it to him. But I want to say, I think in 100% of my leagues, Pascal Siakam was drafted in all of my leagues. I don't really play in shallow leagues. I think all of my leagues are 12 teams or deeper. So Siakam actually got drafted in all my leagues. So I'm not going to say waiver wire pickup of the season for him there. But Coach, a guy who was picked up in a lot of my leagues is Montrezl Harrell. This guy was outstanding. I was really worried about this guy coming into the season because he was coming off the bench, not even starting. I think they had Marcin Gortat as their starting center. The Clippers did. Coach, this guy finished third round value in 9-cat leagues as the number 36 player. Montrezl Harrell got picked up off the wire in a lot of leagues. He is my pick for pickup of the waiver wire pickup of the year. What do you think, Coach? Who do you like?
Well, I certainly can't argue that one. I mean, what a coming out party for that guy. I mean, he, and sort of out of nowhere. I mean, he's been a a backup journeyman a lot of the time that he was there. The one league that I'm in, the 9-cat league, it's a 10-team league, so it's a little shallow. But for some reason in that league, his running mate Lou Williams didn't get picked either, because he was. I think he just slid down the chart because everybody felt he was getting older. He's sort of points dependent, all of those things. So, the duo of Williams and Harrell are probably. I know a lot. Lou was probably taking a lot of leagues, but in mine he happened not to be. So the fact that the Clippers are still alive and still running forward with those two, they're the best players, and they didn't even get drafted in a 10-team fantasy league, is mind-boggling. So, yeah, I would agree with you there on Harrell, and I'd throw Lou in for any of the leagues that he didn't get picked, because both of those guys have just torn it to shreds.
I want to stay on that track, and I want to talk real quick. I don't think we can mention this guy's waiver wire pickup because he got drafted late pretty much in every league. But sticking with the Clippers in that theme, Danilo Gallinari. Coach, this is a guy that I avoid because I am I play it safe. I try to avoid injury-prone players, and he has been the definition of an injury-prone player over the past seasons. But, Coach, he stayed primarily healthy all year long, finished with third-round value. This is a guy that, off the top of my head, I'll say, I think he was drafted like in the 8th or 9th, maybe in some leagues 10th round, that late, and finished as a third-round value. So, again, hats off to the Clippers. I just want to reiterate what you said. What an outstanding job they did. What a great job that they did. Okay, Coach, I want to...
That's a good point, man. That is a good point.
I want to jump over. Let's move over to another award. I'm just looking at this list actually off the ESPN site. They have an award listed as the biggest bust. And, Coach, I'll go first, give you a little second to come up with one on your side. For me, this one kind of hits personal. I drafted Victor Oladipo in probably 3 of my 8 leagues. And now it's a little unfair because he suffered a major injury, which was very disappointing. But even before the injury, he was not returning that late first-round value where I drafted him. I want to say he was somewhere closer to like 4th or 3rd round value. So he was a little disappointing even before he went down. But he's going to be my biggest bust only because I had so much stock in him this year. I loved what I saw from him last year, and I thought he was going to improve and do more, and he was a letdown. And for next year, Coach, he's on my do not draft list. I am terrified of this injury that he suffered this year. I think it's going to take him some time to come back from it. Small chance, and I hate to say this, but there's even a small chance he might not be the same player. An injury like this can really zap your athleticism. So, for me, I'm going to stay away from Victor Oladipo going forward until I see that he's back to the old Victor Oladipo. But anyways, Coach, what are your thoughts on the biggest bust of the year?
Well, this one hits home for me because I took a shot at him in all my leagues because I knew he would slip because of what you said exactly is he's one of those guys that's injury prone all the time. But I just thought he'd step up, and that's Kevin Love from the Cavs. I figured everybody was gone. He was going to have to be the guy. He's going to get the good minutes. And if he's healthy, he's a 20-10 guy. And so, because of his history and how bad the Cavs were going to be, he slipped, to mid-rounds in a lot of leagues. And I scooped him up figuring he was going to be a boom or bust guy, and unfortunately it was bust. Because he just didn't get enough games played. Then he was on minutes restrictions half the time. It was really a frustrating guy to own because you hated to cut him because, when he did play, he threw up some big games, but it just was so infrequent and inconsistent. That was the one that stung me pretty bad.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. Yeah, that was a tough one. Just as you said, I think during the summer when the Cavs they lost LeBron, I think everyone just as Kevin Love is the number one option. People were like dreaming of that Kevin Love from the Minnesota Timberwolves Kevin Love, where he was just putting up big numbers. And, even though that Kevin Love's gone, but even if Kevin Love would have just stayed healthy and played every game this year and played starter minutes, I think it would have been a given that he would have finished with great value and would have been that guy that you thought that he was going to be. I think, now I think going forward we'll probably peg him down a little bit, just guessing that he's going to miss a few games during the year. At this point, it's just tough to see him stay healthy all year. And then the other thing too, Matt, I think the Cavs, Coach, we saw them kind of be that tanking, developing team where they're giving their youngsters run. I don't think that's really going to change for next season. So, I think the Cavs will be in this situation where maybe they rest a lot of their veteran guys. They're out of the playoffs. They're tanking again. And that kind of situation doesn't help Kevin Love as well.
No, I'm with you. As far as I'm concerned, the do not draft list, I'm just plugging the entire Cleveland organization in there. And do not take Tristan Thompson. Do not take. I'm going to go right down the list.
That is great advice. All right, Coach, let's keep rolling. One other award I wanted to talk about. ESPN has a biggest surprise award, and for them it was unanimous. Pascal Siakam. Every one of their analysts went Pascal Siakam. He would probably get my vote, but I have heard a lot of people say, Paul George finishing as the number 2 player in fantasy. I think after Harden and Giannis, you would talk about Paul George as like an MVP candidate. I don't think, he's in the running like those two guys, but probably right behind those two guys. And another guy I want to mention is biggest surprise, Nikola Vucevic. I mean, this is a guy that went in like the late second round in a lot of my leagues, maybe even the beginning of the third round. He finished as the number 9 player in fantasy. So he's been outstanding. But I do agree with Pascal Siakam as being like the biggest surprise of the year. Coach finished as the number 2, second round value on the year, was drafted very late in most leagues. So I guess he would win the award there. But Coach, what do you think about the biggest surprise? Who do you got?
Well, I've got to go with the chalk here as well. I mean, Siakam, went from, like you say, a mid or late mid-round pick to just a star. I mean, other than Kawhi, he's by far the best player on that team, and it just sort of came out of nowhere. So I agree with that 1,000,000%. That guy has a bright future, and he's a two-way player too. He can block shots and athletic, and just an outstanding find for that organization. I love your point about Paul George. I did not think he would get back to the level that he was at prior to the injury, and there's no question he was at that this year. So I think that's a fantastic point there. And you warmed my heart with what I named my personal fantasy MVP this year, because he was the guy that led both of my teams to the championship, was Vucevic. Got him in the second round in 2 of the leagues, and the third round in the other league, late second round in both leagues too. And I mean, he just was a consistent monster all year. And the thing that I'm excited about is I've read multiple articles here in Dallas that they're going to land him in free agency. So that was exciting to have Luka, Vucevic, and Porzingis in there together. We'd be, the Dallas team would be like all European, but that's what they're talking about. And now I just read today that Dragic might come here in a buyout case with Miami, so they could have all four European guys. But that would be a fun group to watch play. So I'm with you on those. Siakam has to be, deserves to be unanimous though, for sure. And look forward to see how he does, if he can continue going forward.
Yeah, and one other really interesting thing, I am really curious to see where Siakam goes next year. As you said, two-way player. I feel like we haven't seen the best of him yet. Like he hasn't reached his ceiling yet. So, finishing a second round value. Is he going to get drafted there next year? Another really interesting thing, if Kawhi Leonard ends up leaving Toronto, if he bolts to sign with another team, I think that just also improves Siakam's value because now more usage for him, probably more shots. So really curious to see what happens in the offseason and at the start of next season when we're doing mock drafts and we get like draft season, how high is this guy going to go? So a lot of interesting stuff there.
You're right, because you don't want to overreact to one season. I mean, I remember it was probably 5 years ago when Ibaka had that fantastic year for the Thunder. He led the league in blocks. He was just unbelievable stats-wise for that season. And I fell right into that bear trap, man. I took him in the second stinking round with
Me too, Coach.
like the 19th pick, and the dude was just awful. So it's you don't want to overreact, but we'll see. And I'll tell you, I'm from the school of thought, sort of opposite on that. I think if Leonard leaves, it may hurt Siakam because he's going to get the double teams. People are going to be shifting on him. They're going to game plan to him, whereas they're doing that with Kawhi now. And I think the fact that he gets to run sort of Robin to the Batman thing there is what's really helped propel him. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But, I wouldn't mind having him on my squad. He's got great upside.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Coach, one last award for the evening. And you had mentioned Coach, before we started the show, Coach of the Year, Fantasy Coach of the Year. Who do you got? Who is your Fantasy Coach of the Year?
Well, I'll tell you what. I know it sounds like, okay, you're just making this up now because of what the Clippers have done, but I said this before the playoffs started. The fact that Doc Rivers, and I mentioned it last year too. I know it, or last week, I'm sorry, but the fact that he took this team that had basically given up on the season, traded their best player, did all, to rally them up and get them playing like that there was no doubt that they were in the playoff hunt. They were the 5th seed for a while. So actually, if you remember, after the first month of the season, they were in first place in the West. So I just think that what he did, and, again, I know everybody wants to give it to Coach Bud at Milwaukee and all these guys that won all the games, but I'll tell you right now, there aren't many coaches that could have led them into the playoffs with the squad that he had to put out there. So I'm sticking with Doc Rivers. How about you?
I love your take on Doc Rivers, man. I think, we've been talking about it all show. Montrezl Harrell, Danilo Gallinari. When Tobias Harris was there, he was putting up great value. Lou Williams. I mean, this is a team. Doc really got the most out of that team. And fantasy-wise, so many Clippers that Coach, I stayed away from the Clippers on draft day because I didn't really know what to expect from them with so many incoming young guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I didn't really know what to expect. And Doc did a really good job, not only reality-wise, but fantasy-wise. A lot of good players having value. But I am going to give the award to Coach Bud in Milwaukee, and not just because they finished as the number 1 seed, best team in the NBA, but Coach, Neil and I, we were doing the box score breakdown show every night, and I was shocked every night. They would have 4 or 5 guys in every single night on a game-to-game basis that put up fantasy value, reliable fantasy value. And Coach, there are some teams like off the top of my head, the Knicks, that maybe they have like one player that you can count on for fantasy or something, where the Bucks night to night had 4 guys consistently putting up good fantasy value. And I just love when a coach can like spread around the usage, the production, and also get the wins. So even though I agree with you on Doc Rivers, he's going to finish second place right behind Coach Bud. I'm going to give it to Coach Bud.
I
what
agree.
do you think?
I mean, I don't, disagree with you at all. I think I've been a huge Coach Bud fan for a long time. I was absolutely shocked that Atlanta let him go. I thought that was just insane because he always gets the most out of his players and makes a huge difference. So, yeah, he'll definitely win it. There's no doubt in my mind, and I think it's well-deserved. There's no question. But you are a chalk player, Adrian. You're a chalk player.
You know what, though? I mean, nobody has done more with the lack of talent than they had than Doc Rivers. I knew he was a great coach when he was with the Celtics. And then, those teams with the Clippers when they had CP3 and Blake, I kind of lost a little bit of faith. I think maybe Doc Rivers doing that two-hat thing where he was the general manager along with the coach, maybe that wasn't working out. I think now that he's just the coach, just focusing on the day-to-day coaching stuff, that's really his lane. That's where he's really the best. And we're seeing it this year. We've seen it all year. We're seeing it right now in the playoffs. I mean, I can't believe they are taking the Warriors right now to a Game 6. Unbelievable, man.
Funny, man.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think he got caught into a situation there where he was trying to make the Blake Griffin, Chris Paul thing work, and no one could because they hate each other's guts and there was no chemistry there. And he just got stuck in that nightmare. But I think now that he's free of all of that stress, you're getting to see some of his good coaching. But there's been some great coaching jobs around the league. I mean, guys that getting their first opportunities. The gentleman that took over the Hawks, I did not know him well at all. But I tell you what, if you watched the Hawks the last month of the season, they got after it. They beat some good teams, and
yes,
with real young guys, Young and Collins, and just that young nucleus. I think the Hawks have a nice future too, and he's a good young coach. So. Yeah, it's good to see some new blood in there, and that's why I was just going on a rampage last night on the show with Neil about the Lakers. They just drive me insane. Why on earth would you want to bring in Tyrone Lue or Jason Kidd? I mean, retreaded coaches that aren't good coaches that just aren't get somebody in there like a Monty Williams or somebody with a fresh perspective that can go in there that's, gonna get it done. So, the Lakers are a mess. So we'll see how they do with this coaching selection. But I just, it's frustrating to see these guys get rehired and they just go in and sort of blow up a team and lose, and yet they get another opportunity. It's really crazy when there's, look at Nick Nurse at Toronto. I mean, he did a fantastic job, and he just needed the opportunity to get out there and get it done. So hopefully they'll continue to get some new young blood in there, and hopefully the Lakers don't fall into that crazy trap either.
Yeah, it is definitely some dark days right now in Lakerland, so we will see how that shakes out. All right, Coach, I think that's about it for today's show, man. Great show. Let's wrap this up. Where can everybody reach you at?
Well, let me just say one thing, too, because I want to make sure and always thank our sponsor, Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. I wanted to mention them, before we checked out today. We really appreciate them and, just the whole team at Hoop Ball. And you can find me at Joe Sarvadi. That's JoeSarvadi on Twitter. If you want to get some discussions going, jump in, the Hoop Ball app and hit the forums, and we can get some conversations going there as well. And, I'll be doing this show with you every week and maybe jumping in a couple other ones. And, I'll close with one thought is, if you shut down your fantasy league following for basketball now that, the season's winding down, and then decide to pick it back up 2 or 3 weeks before your draft, you're in big trouble. So that my biggest piece of advice for the hoop ballers out there tonight is you got to stay with it. Follow the news, listen to the podcasts, watch the discussions, the trade discussions, the free agent discussions, the draft. I mean, more stuff goes on in the off season that will prepare you for your draft than just doing the crunch at the end right before the draft happens. So anyway, that's my soapbox for the evening. And great job again tonight. Love doing the show with you, Adrian. And my fantasy MVP for best hoop baller podcaster goes to Adrian, the Chalk again.
Thanks, Coach. Hey, guys, hit me up. I'm at Adrian Benjamins. I love what Coach just said. I think our main focus when we do this show weekly is to prepare you guys for the upcoming season. Coach, I know you're on board with me when I say let's do a lot of sleepers, or maybe guys we're avoiding, guys that we're targeting. We're going to focus on a lot of prep in this off season. So stick with us. We're really excited to be with you guys. Our show's going to move to Fridays now. I had some scheduling midweek, so we're going to record the show every Thursday night, release it Friday morning. So we're really excited to be with you guys all off season. So thanks a lot for listening, supporting the show. Hope you guys all have a great weekend. Some amazing playoff games going down this weekend. So, Coach, we're going to have a lot to talk about next week. All right, you guys. We will see you later.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.